Today we're going on a journey through the lows of the NFL, aiming to figure out what went wrong during the worst quarterback seasons of the 2010s. This decade proved that even with seasoned veterans, high draft picks, or all-time greats, one bad season can plummet an entire career in the NFL. The quarterback position can be a roller coaster of success and failure. So don't change the channel because we're about to revisit those seasons that might have slipped your mind, but they were so bad it made you want to watch. These are the worst NFL quarterbacks in each season from 2010 to 2019. First up, we've got 2010. When the Carolina Panthers made the decision to move on from Jake Delhomme, they pinned their hopes on a young quarterback from Notre Dame. The Carolina Panthers weren't expecting the world from Jimmy Clausen when they took him in the second round of the 2010 NFL Draft, but there was a sense of optimism that he could be the quarterback to lead a stale Panthers franchise into a fresh new beginning. However, what unfolded was one of the worst quarterback seasons of all time. The Panthers, under then head coach John Fox, were coming off an 8-8 season, and the team was in dire need of not just a quarterback, but a complete offensive reboot. This set the stage for Clausen, who found himself starting in a situation that was less than ideal. The offensive line was okay, but Clausen was still sacked 33 times in his starts, though I'm sure plenty of those were on him. His receivers, outside of Steve Smith, who was nearing the end of his prime, could not consistently create separation or make plays after the catch, further hampering the young quarterback's performance. And the numbers from Clausen's rookie season are startling. In his 10 starts, he managed a mere 3 touchdown passes, a figure so low it's nearly impossible to believe. On the flip side, his interception total stood at 9. Yes, this man had 3 times as many interceptions as touchdowns. His completion percentage was a gross 52.5%, and his yards per attempt were among the lowest in the league at 5.2. These stats combined for a passer rating of just 58.4. Painting the picture of a QB who was simply overwhelmed by the leap to the NFL. And as you can imagine, the impact on the Panthers was profound as well. With Clausen at the helm, the team managed to win just 1 game, finishing the season as a whole with a 2-14 record, and securing the top pick in the next draft. This season was a low point for Carolina, one where even having an offensive strategy seemed pointless because they had Clausen under center. And the quarterback position was in desperate need of fixing once again. Media coverage was relentless, with Clausen often being the butt of criticism, his performance scrutinized in every possible way. Analysts and fans alike questioned whether the Panthers had completely misjudged his talent or if he was simply thrust into too challenging a situation too soon. The season was so disappointing that Clausen would never be viewed as a starting caliber quarterback ever again. For Clausen, the 2010 season effectively ruined his career. In the aftermath, he was released in 2013, then briefly spent time as a backup in Chicago and Baltimore before leaving the NFL for good. Meanwhile, the Panthers would move on, drafting Cam Newton in the 2011 NFL Draft. In the end, Clausen just didn't belong on an NFL field. But ironically enough, Carolina owes him a thank you for his role in allowing them to secure the number 1 overall pick and usher in a golden age of Panthers football with Cam Newton. Up next, we have 2011. This one could have gone to 2 guys. Curtis Painter went 0-8 while filling in for an injured Peyton Manning in Indianapolis, helping lock down the first overall pick for the Colts to draft Andrew Luck. But because he only started 8 games, I'm going with Blaine Gabbert. Outside of Cam Newton, the first round of the 2011 draft was filled with busts at quarterback. Specifically, Jake Locker, who was taken by the Titans, Christian Ponder, who was taken by the Vikings, and Blaine Gabbert, who was taken by the Jaguars. Selected 10th overall, Gabbert was seen as the savior for a Jaguars team that had just parted ways with their previous quarterback, David Garrard. During the preseason, Jacksonville released Garrard because of performance issues and a lingering back injury. The hope was that Gabbert, with his 6'6" frame, strong arm, and promising college career at Missouri, would quickly adapt to the pro game and lead the Jags to better days. However, the Jaguars' decision to start Gabbert was questionable from the outset. Initially, the plan was for him to sit and learn behind Garrard, but with Garrard's release and Luke McCown's lackluster performances, Gabbert was thrust into the starting role earlier than anticipated, and the team around him was not ideal for nurturing a rookie quarterback. Their top 2 receivers were Jason Hill and Mike Thomas, and no, not that Mike Thomas. If not for Maurice Jones-Drew leading the league in rushing, this might have been one of the least talented offenses in the history of the NFL. And the head coach at the time, Jack Del Rio, was under pressure to win now, not in the future. Gabbert's rookie year was bad in every way. In 15 games, he only managed to throw for 2,214 yards with 12 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. His completion percentage was 51% and his passer rating stood at 65, both at the very bottom of the league. Another telling aspect of Gabbert's season was the number of times he was sacked, 40 times, which was one of the highest in the league that year. This stat not only reflected poorly on the offensive line, but also on Gabbert's decision-making, often holding on to the ball too long or not stepping up in the pocket, showing an inability to process at the NFL level. He struggled with reading defenses, his accuracy was inconsistent, and he lacked the poise needed to manage games effectively, especially with such a terrible supporting cast. The Jaguars' record was a dismal 5-11, with Gabbert's performance of course being a significant factor in games lost due to turnovers or inability to score. The fan base and local media grew increasingly frustrated, with Gabbert becoming a symbol of the team's broader issues. His season was defined by an overall lack of readiness for the NFL's speed and complexity. In the aftermath, Gabbert's rookie year set a tone for his early career with the Jags, one of failure. And after his rookie year, Jacksonville knew they were going to have to restart their search for a signal caller. But in true Jaguars fashion, the one they would go on to draft as their next franchise quarterback would end up on this list himself. As for Gabbert, he eventually moved on to other teams, finding success as a backup, if you want to call that success. But his rookie season serves as an example of why NFL teams are hesitant to throw rookie quarterbacks into the fire with such a lackluster supporting cast in today's NFL. Moving on, let's look at 2012. This was another year that could have gone two different ways. Matt Castle went 1-7 as a starter in Kansas City with just 6 touchdowns to 12 picks. But Mark Sanchez was just as bad in more games in a season that is etched in NFL lore, not for its triumphs but for its tribulations, culminating in one of the most infamous moments in football history. Coming off of 3 seasons where Sanchez had shown flashes of potential, including leading the Jets to back-to-back AFC Championship games, expectations were still somewhat high. However, Sanchez's career would come crumbling down in 2012. The Jets entered the season in the media spotlight per usual, especially after the acquisition of Tim Tebow, which was meant to add a dynamic element to their offense, but the move created a quarterback controversy rather than providing support. Sanchez was supposed to be the starter, but the looming presence of Tebow, who was coming off of a playoff victory himself, created a tense atmosphere. Sanchez's stats from the season reflect his struggles. In 15 starts, he threw for 2,883 yards with 13 touchdowns against 18 interceptions, giving him a passer rating of just 66.9. His completion percentage was a mere 54%, and even when he was completing passes, they were not of the explosive variety. His lack of ball security was alarming, with 14 fumbles to go along with the 18 interceptions. And during a Thanksgiving night game against the New England Patriots, Sanchez would hit rock bottom. In a moment that would define his season and become a meme for years to come, Sanchez ran into his own lineman's backside, fumbling the ball, which was returned for a touchdown by the Patriots. A play that would be coined the butt fumble was more than just a blooper. It summarized the Jets' offensive dysfunction and Sanchez's inability to elevate the team when it mattered most. It was the unforgettable nature of this play that earned Sanchez the prestigious honor of being named the worst quarterback of 2012. The Jets' record under Sanchez that year was a disappointing 6-10, a far cry from the playoff aspirations at the season's start. The offensive line, already a weak link, offered little protection, leading to Sanchez being sacked 34 times. The receivers struggled to get open, which is no surprise when the receiving core was led by Stephen Hill and Jeremy Curley, and the offense as a whole lacked any sort of identity. Sanchez was not talented enough to carry such a lifeless offense, and his decision-making under pressure was often criticized. The New York media and fans were relentless. Sanchez, once the hope of the franchise, was now the butt of every joke, with his performance dissected in every possible way. The quarterback situation became a spectacle, with calls for Tebow to take over growing louder and louder with each poor performance from Sanchez. After this season, Sanchez's career with the Jets spiraled downward. He would be benched late in the year, signaling the end of his tenure as the team's starter. His 2012 was a dark comedy. It had every ingredient for the media to feed on. Poor performance by a high draft pick while Tim Tebow sat behind him on a team that had experienced recent success in New York, and one of the funniest plays of all time to boot. But while it's easy to find humor in the season, we also witnessed the unraveling of both Sanchez's confidence and his career. Now let's look at 2013, where, sadly, it's the Jets. Again. After an electric college career at West Virginia, Geno Smith was selected in the second round of the 2013 NFL Draft, despite being in contention for the first overall pick. Geno was expected to rejuvenate the Jets' offense after the turbulent end to Mark Sanchez's tenure. However, the season would unfold very differently from what fans and analysts had hoped. Geno Smith's 2013 season was yet another narrative of a promising young quarterback's rookie year going terribly wrong on a team that provided zero help. The Jets' decision to draft Smith was part of a broader strategy to rebuild their offense, but they were entering the season with significant uncertainties. Geno faced the daunting task of stepping into a starting role with a team in transition. The offensive line was still not especially robust, and the receiving corps still lacked a true number one option, with Stephen Hill and Jeremy Curley still there, along with the corpse of Santonio Holmes. This put extra pressure on Smith to carry the offense more than a second-round rookie should have to. Geno's statistical output that season was telling of his struggles. He started all 16 games, throwing for 3,046 yards, which might seem respectable for a rookie, but his touchdown to interception ratio was 12-21. His completion percentage was only 56%, and his passer rating was a league-low 66.5, combining both mistakes and inefficiency. One of the defining moments of Smith's season came in a Week 2 game against the New England Patriots, where he threw 3 interceptions in the fourth quarter alone, leading to a loss that proved he was not ready. Despite moments where he showed flashes of potential, like leading last-minute comebacks against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Atlanta Falcons, his inconsistency was a significant detriment to the team's success. The Jets finished the season with an 8-8 record, which is actually impressive given how bad their offense was. While they managed to stay competitive, Smith's turnovers often put them in precarious positions. His play was filled with poor decisions under pressure, issues with ball security, and struggles with reading defenses, all common among first-year quarterbacks, but particularly pronounced in Smith's case. Like Sanchez, media coverage was tough on Geno as well, with his performance becoming a focal point for critique, leading to a rapid shift in perception from hopeful rookie who the Jets stole in the second round to a quarterback with significant doubts about his NFL viability. Before he could even finish his rookie season, many already questioned if he was the right choice for the Jets' future. In the aftermath, Smith's rookie year set a challenging tone for his career, only starting one more season in New York before being demoted to the second string. He then spent years trying to overcome his reputation as he bounced around the league, eventually finding a second chance with the Seattle Seahawks and thriving. But this season remains a low point, a reminder of how quickly the NFL can humble even the most promising of talents. Now onto 2014, where we're back to the Jaguars. For those tallying at home, by the way, that's the Panthers, Jags, Jets, and Jags. Are you sensing a theme here? The Jaguars' strategy going into the 2014 draft with the third overall pick was clear. They needed a new face at quarterback after years of cycling through various options without any success. Luckily for them, there was a strong and athletic 6'5" quarterback by the name of Blake Bortles who was earning comparisons to Ben Roethlisberger and was expected to be available when they got on the clock. And he was, so they took him. But Blake Bortles' 2014 season with the Jags was another baptism by fire for a rookie quarterback. Again, sensing a theme? The expectations for Bortles were sky high, with the Jags hoping he could be what Blaine Gabbert ultimately could not. But things didn't go exactly as planned. Despite his promising physical traits, Bortles was seen as a project with high potential rather than an NFL-ready quarterback. So the decision to start him early in the season after initially keeping him on the bench behind veteran Chad Henne raised eyebrows. The move was partly due to the team's uninspiring performance to begin the season, pushing them to see what their young quarterback could do. But Bortles' rookie year was challenging to say the least. In 14 games, he threw for 2,908 yards with 11 touchdowns against 17 interceptions. His completion percentage was 58.9%, and he averaged only 6.1 yards per attempt, culminating in a league-worst passer rating of 69.5. He was at or near the bottom of the NFL in nearly every statistical category, and he was sacked a whopping 55 times, also the most in the league. One of the defining games of Bortles' season was against the Indianapolis Colts, where he threw 2 interceptions, including a pick 6 in a blowout 44-17 loss. Despite moments of promise, such as a late-game rally against the Giants, his overall performance was inconsistent, to put it nicely, with turnovers often overshadowing any progress he made. The Jags ended the season with a 3-13 record, with Bortles' play contributing significantly to the team's woes. Defenses were licking their chops week in, week out playing the Jags, with nothing to fear from them on offense. Bortles often seemed to force passes into coverage or miss his targets on the rare occasion that his receivers actually got open. In college, he could rely on his God-given gifts, but in the NFL, his mistakes were getting punished. Media coverage was mixed. There was a recognition of Bortles' potential, but it was obvious he was still too raw to take advantage of his physical tools. Analysts pointed out his need for better decision-making, improved footwork, and a more thorough understanding of NFL defenses. The fan base remained somewhat hopeful given his athletic ability and the glimpses of what he could become. But frustration with the team's overall performance was loud and clear. While the 2014 season was difficult for everybody involved in Jacksonville, brief but happy times were on the horizon. Bortles would eventually have moments of brilliance. He threw 35 touchdowns the very next year in 2015 and led the Jags to an AFC Championship game in 2017. But after further performance issues, he would find himself in a backup role. And after the 2021 season, he was out of the NFL entirely. Switching gears to 2015, we have a bit of a sad one. Peyton Manning's 2015 season with the Denver Broncos is one of the most peculiar finales in NFL history. Certainly not for its statistical success, but for how it set a new precedent for winning in spite of bad quarterback play. Manning entered his last season amid speculation about his arm strength and overall physical decline, because despite throwing 39 touchdowns in 2014, he fell off a cliff in the final 4 games, throwing just 3 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. But in his first 3 seasons with the Broncos, he averaged an unreal 44 passing touchdowns per year. And again, no matter how bad the last month was, he was coming off of a 39 touchdown season. That, coupled with the fact that Denver had one of the best defenses in the league, the stage was set for another good year in Denver, with potential dominance on both sides of the ball. But 2015 would actually turn out to be a contrast between defensive dominance and offensive struggle. The season began with weekly bad performances by Manning, throwing at least 1 pick in every single game, signaling that his legendary career was at its twilight. His performance was statistically the worst of his career. In 9 starts, he threw for 2,249 yards with only 9 touchdowns against 17 interceptions, resulting in a passer rating of 67.9. Numbers I'm certain made Manning sick to his stomach. His yards per attempt was 6.8 and his completion percentage was only 59.8%. As arguably the best regular season quarterback of all time, these numbers were a shocking departure from Manning's usual prolific stats, painting a picture of a quarterback whose body was no longer cooperating with his mind. Manning's season was peppered with moments of vintage play and history. He set the all-time passing yards record in Week 10 against the Kansas City Chiefs. But play was tainted by reduced arm strength, leading to underthrown passes and an inability to drive the ball downfield. But what made this season so unique was the Broncos' strategy. Recognizing Manning's limitations, Coach Gary Kubiak tailored the offense to minimize his exposure. The team leaned heavily on its defense, which was historically good, as well as a potent running game led by C.J. Anderson and Ronnie Hillman. This conservative strategy allowed the Broncos to navigate through the regular season with a 12-4 record, securing the top seed in the AFC. Additionally, after an injury to Brock Osweiler in the regular season finale, Manning would get another chance to lead the Broncos through the playoffs. And that's exactly what he did, particularly in the AFC Championship game against the New England Patriots, where he threw for 176 yards and 2 touchdowns without an interception. But the climax came in Super Bowl 50 against the Carolina Panthers. Manning's performance was certainly not the star of the show. That honor, much like the rest of the season, went to the defense, which overwhelmed Cam Newton and the Panthers' offense. Manning's contribution was minimal, but he managed the game well enough to support the defensive masterclass that led to a convincing 24-10 victory, earning him his second Super Bowl ring. After the Super Bowl win, Manning announced his retirement, leaving the NFL on a bittersweet note. The 2015 season was an interesting one for Manning, technically riding off into the sunset on top of the NFL world, but as the worst version of himself on the field that anyone had ever seen. His team won it all in spite of him rather than because of him, as he and NFL fans were so accustomed to. Let's turn our attention to 2016, where we've got another rookie. Jared Goff's 2016 season with the Los Angeles Rams is often cited as one of the most challenging rookie years for a quarterback, especially for one selected first overall in the NFL draft. Coming out of the University of California, there was some debate about whether Goff or Carson Wentz should go first overall in the 2016 draft. But ultimately, Goff was granted that honor. He was seen as the quarterback who would usher in a new era for the Rams, who had just moved back to Los Angeles. However, his rookie season was anything but the heralded start that many anticipated. The Rams' selection of Goff was the first step in rebuilding the franchise. But unfortunately, they were entering the season under the stewardship of Jeff Fisher, whose tenure with the team had been marked by mediocrity. At this point, it seemed the league had passed Fisher by. The offensive scheme was not tailored to capitalize on Goff's strengths, and the team around him was in flux. The offensive line, while having some talent, was inconsistent, and the receiving core was young and unproven, with the notable exception of Kenny Britt, who never lived up to his own potential. Goff's rookie year was simply brutal. Initially, he sat behind Case Keenum, only getting his chance to start late in the season. And in those 7 starts, Goff completed 54.6% of his passes for 1,089 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions, leading to a passer rating of 63.6. In an offense void of high-end receivers, led by poor coaching, Goff was destined to fail. The Rams' performance with Goff at the helm was telling. They went 0-7 in his starts, finishing the season with a 4-12 record. His games were characterized by rookie mistakes, holding on to the ball too long, missing open receivers, and occasionally looking overwhelmed by the professional game's pace. The season was summarized by their Week 12 matchup against the Saints. Goff had the best game of his season, throwing for 3 touchdowns, while Los Angeles still got blown out 49-21. Despite moments where he showed flashes of his college prowess, these were exceptions in a season filled with struggles. And as is always the case when rookie quarterbacks don't live up to the hype in their first year, many questioned whether Goff was truly franchise QB material, especially given his selection over other prospects like Carson Wentz. The narrative around Goff's season was one of a quarterback needing significant development. Many attributed his poor performance to his own inexperience, but also the lack of a supportive system around him. Fortunately, the following year would bring a dramatic turnaround with the arrival of Sean McVay as the head coach, who revitalized Goff's career. Geno Smith and Jared Goff are reminders that a rookie's introduction to the NFL can be marred by a combination of personal adjustment to the league and a team not ready to support a young quarterback's growth. But it doesn't mean they're doomed. Next on our list is 2017 with DeShone Kizer. Kizer's 2017 season with the Browns is arguably the worst one of the decade. Taken in the second round of the draft out of Notre Dame, Kizer was thrust into the starting role for a Browns team that seems to be in a never-ending rebuild. One that had not seen a winning season since 2007. The hope was that Kizer could spark the franchise with his size, arm strength, and scrambling ability. But instead, he led the Browns to perhaps the worst season in the history of the NFL. Cleveland's decision to start Kizer to begin with was mostly due to the fact that they had absolutely no other option. The other quarterbacks on the roster were Kevin Hogan and Cody Kessler. So head coach Hugh Jackson figured they might as well see what Kizer could do, or could not do. Their team was in complete disarray. The receiving core lacked a true number one. Kenny Britt snuck his way onto this Browns team as well. Guess he just loves bad quarterback play. And the coaching staff was honestly the laughingstock of the NFL. The environment was not conducive to the development of a rookie quarterback. But let's be real, Kizer just didn't have it. His season was marked by staggering turnover numbers. In 15 games, he threw for 2,894 yards, along with a crippling touchdown to interception ratio of 11-22. His passer rating was by far a league low 60.5, making him one of the least efficient quarterbacks ever. He also fumbled 9 times, losing 6 of them, contributing to a ridiculous 28 total turnovers. To put it simply, he just couldn't move the ball, unless he was giving it to the other team. His worst game came in Week 11 against the Jaguars, where he threw 2 interceptions and fumbled the ball 3 times, one of which was returned for a touchdown by Jacksonville. This game was emblematic of his entire season, where his mistakes were not just costly, but often glaringly so. It was so bad it made you want to watch. He showed small moments of potential, like the final game of the season where he threw for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Steelers, but this was the exception in a season that was almost entirely bad. Oh, by the way, Kizer's record that year as a starter, 0-15. Yeah, he didn't win a single game, and the Browns finished 0-16, making it only the second time in NFL history a team had accomplished such a feat. While the entire Browns team struggled, Kizer's performance was a focal point, with his turnovers directly leading to losses in several games. The only relief was the fact that, because it was the Browns, there wasn't much reason to harp on Kizer's performance. It was more like, oh, look at the Browns being terrible again. How cute. After the season, the Browns traded Kizer to the Green Bay Packers. His tenure in Cleveland was short but memorable for all the wrong reasons. There was a silver lining though, because Kizer and the Browns were so bad, like Jimmy Clausen before him, he earned Cleveland the number 1 overall pick, where they were gifted with Myles Garrett. But back to Kizer. In 2018, he filled in for Aaron Rodgers in Week 17 after Rodgers suffered a concussion in the beginning of the game. He lost 31-0 to the Detroit Lions and never played another snap in the NFL. Moving on to 2018. As incredible as this may sound, Josh Allen actually had a very solid case for this award. But I'm going with Josh Rosen. Selected 10th overall in the 2018 NFL Draft by the Arizona Cardinals, Rosen was highly coveted coming out of UCLA, seen as the quarterback who could lead the Cardinals out of their post-Carson Palmer era. But considering the fact that he's on this list, you can probably venture to guess that did not happen. The Cardinals entered the season with a new head coach after Bruce Arians moved on. Steve Wilks was more defensively oriented, whereas Arians was a bit of a quarterback guru. And on paper, the Cardinals' offense might have looked okay. They had Larry Fitzgerald, Christian Kirk, and running back David Johnson. But unfortunately for Rosen, the game isn't played on paper. Fitzgerald was 35 years old, Christian Kirk was a rookie, and David Johnson's efficiency fell off a cliff that year. Not to mention their offensive line wasn't good either. But let's not sugarcoat it, I think we can all agree he would not have been good no matter what. Rosen's stats from his rookie year tell the story. In 14 games, with 13 starts, he passed for 2,278 yards, throwing 11 touchdowns against 14 interceptions. His completion percentage was 55.2%, and his passer rating was 66.7, finishing a touch below Josh Allen for the worst among qualified passers that year. Rosen showed rare glimpses of why he was highly regarded coming out of college. His arm talent, his poise in the pocket at times, and his his ability to make some tough throws, but these paled in comparison to his struggles against the speed and complexity of NFL defenses. The Cardinals managed only 3 wins with Rosen starting, finishing the season with a 3-13 record and securing the first overall pick in the next draft. One notable good game, however, was against the San Francisco 49ers, where Rosen threw for 250 yards and 2 touchdowns. But games like the one against the Los Angeles Chargers, where he lost 45-10, were more representative of his season. The lack of a consistent run game, the absence of an explosive receiver, and the constant pressure from opposing defenses made for a perfect storm of difficulties for Rosen. Luckily for Rosen, he was not the only rookie QB to have a difficult season in 2018. Josh Allen and Sam Darnold kept him company on the struggle bus, while Baker Mayfield had a historically good rookie season. But Rosen was bad enough that the Cardinals decided to move on after just 1 year. Due in part to Rosen, Arizona had the first pick, which they used to select Kyler Murray, signaling a quick end to Rosen's tenure as the franchise's quarterback. The very next day, after selecting Murray, they traded Rosen to the Miami Dolphins, and he has since washed out of the NFL. Last up, we have the 2019 NFL season. Despite only starting 7 games, Dwayne Haskins was the clear-cut worst quarterback in the league, so he gets the nod. Selected 15th overall in the 2019 NFL Draft out of Ohio State, where he had a historic year, throwing for nearly 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns. Haskins was pegged as the potential savior for a franchise desperate for a prolific passer like Haskins. But playing for such a stacked program like Ohio State, there were inevitably questions about whether Haskins would be able to carry over his collegiate dominance to the NFL. Washington's choice to draft Haskins injected hope back into the franchise after Alex Smith suffered a career-altering leg injury in 2018. However, the Redskins were entering the season with significant challenges. Head coach Jay Gruden was on the hot seat, and their best weapons were a rookie Terry McLaurin, who was a teammate of Haskins at Ohio State, and a 34-year-old Adrian Peterson. Haskins understandably started the season as a backup, sitting behind Case Keenum and Colt McCoy, but by week 9 he was thrust into the starting role. Without even watching the games, it was clear looking at the stat sheet that Haskins was struggling. In 9 games with 7 starts, he threw for 1,365 yards with 7 touchdowns and 7 interceptions, resulting in a passer rating of 76.1, which would have been the worst in the league had he played enough to qualify. His completion percentage was 58.6, and for a big-bodied, strong-armed quarterback who was an explosive passer in college, he was not able to complete big passes in the same way at the next level. The Redskins' record with Haskins as the starter was a disheartening 2-5, contributing to their overall 3-13 season. There were moments of promise, like his performance against the Detroit Lions where he led a late-game comeback, but these were far outweighed by performances where the offense stalled or he turned the ball over. However, he gave Washington fans hope that he would take a step forward in 2020 with how he ended the 2019 season. In his final 2 games, he didn't throw a single interception and threw 4 touchdowns. There were mixed thoughts about Haskins. A bad season with rumors of a poor work ethic, but a season that was capped off with the 2 best games of his young career. Following the 2019 season, Haskins was expected to be the starter for all of 2020, but development issues along with work ethic problems and an affinity for nightlife would lead to his release in 2020 before season's end. The following season, he was signed by the Steelers to be their backup, but just 1 year later, his story took an extremely weird and tragic turn. In April of 2022, he was attempting to cross I-595, a highway near Fort Lauderdale, Florida, on foot when he was struck by a dump truck, ending his life. So there you have it, the worst quarterback seasons of the 2010s, where we witnessed a parade of rookie struggles on teams that were already floundering. It's a reminder that in the NFL, the transition to the pros can be brutal, even for those who shredded opposing secondaries in college, especially when they're thrown into the fire with a franchise in disarray. If you enjoyed this video, maybe check out these ones, and hit the magic button for more NFL content.